Guys, welcome to this week's edition of Dots and Dashes. Now, we've got a really special person with us today. It's Colin Sutton, and he has recently been voted in with a huge majority, I might add, as our new Reform Police and Crime Commissioner in our area. Welcome, Colin. The floor is yours.
Welcome, Colin.
Thank you. It's good to be here. So, I've done 2 weeks now as the Police and Crime Commissioner in Norfolk, and it's exciting. It's been a busy couple of weeks with meeting, all the people that work in. There's a team of about 30 people that run the office. Meeting the Chief Constable a couple of times. I met the Deputy in an online meeting yesterday as well. I'm very enthusiastic about how we can make a difference. Norfolk Constabulary is actually a very good police force anyway, but there was just a little bit of refocusing around some things that I want to see more of, particularly in relation to what we do in rural areas, because Norfolk's a very rural county. It's 90% rural, and about 70% of the people here make their living from agriculture. So I think we should make sure we try and protect that and make sure their equipment and land and so forth are safe. So looking at that, already managed to find some money to use, about £200,000 that wasn't being used, that we're going to use as long as we can get the sort of financial regulations right. And I think we can to put that into 4 or maybe even 5 new support workers for domestic abuse, in looking at getting these banning orders and civil orders on domestic abuse perpetrators. So a way of trying to sort of restrict them and stop them carrying on what they were doing. So that's really good news in the first couple of weeks. And we're carrying on looking at where we can perhaps make savings or move things around so that we can do more with the same, because what I don't want to be doing is asking the good people of Norfolk for ever more money. It's not far for me to go to work. It's an easy commute, as it were, and it's a bit of a culture shock having a full-time job again after quite a number of years without it, where I've been doing sort of writing things and TV and things like that. So getting up early every day and putting a suit and a tie on is something I've not got used to, but I'll soon drop back into it again. And it's really good for me to be in the kind of policing environment. I grew up in it because my father was a policeman, and I knew him and all his friends, obviously, and that sort of environment. Then I joined. And I did 30 years in the police, and then I've sort of commentated on it and written about it ever since I retired. So it's really my sort of life story is one that's sort of inextricably entwined with policing, I guess. And my son's taken up the mantle as well. He's a police officer in London. And actually, we had his wedding on Thursday this week, so I didn't go into work on Thursday because my son got married.
Congratulations.
Yeah, and it was a lovely day. It was just done so well at one of these sort of country barn venues where they do the whole thing there, the ceremony and the reception as well, and lots of space and lots of his friends and family and people that I knew there, and had a really good day there. We did in the sunshine. So that was a nice break, and I think they've gone off now to the Isle of Skye, which is an unusual destination for the immediate honeymoon. I think they're going to go somewhere else later in the year, but they've got 3 or 4 days up in Scotland for this. So that was really good, and something I've been looking forward to. I've got a number of visits planned for the coming sort of 3 or 4 weeks in the constabulary to go and try and get round many of the different branches and see the people who work there, and see what their sort of issues are and what their problems are. The question I'll keep asking is, what do you need to make your job easier, to do your job better? That's really the question. Because I've got a big kind of feeling that the brave young men and women who sign on and do the policing at the sharp end, the constables and the sergeants, they really are. They need support. They need support in what they're doing. It's the toughest kind of context ever to do policing in, and there's so much scrutiny and accountability, that they need support to do their job well. They want to do the job well. That's why they do it. That's why they signed on. It's not a job you do because the pay is particularly good, because it isn't. It's not a job you do because the conditions are particularly good, because they aren't. It's a job you do because you have a real desire to serve your community and make things better for the community. And we need to capture that, and we need to make sure that the people who are prepared to come forward and do that are supported in being the best they can. And of course, the whole community deserves them being the best they can, because we all rely upon it. And it's a question really of making sure, for me, the big thing I can achieve in 21 months is to get to a place where the neighbourhoods in Norfolk believe that the police are working for them and are addressing their problems, and not on some other sort of agenda imposed from above, but it's got to be locally accountable and locally suitable. So, yeah, that's where we've come to in the last week or so, I guess.
Excellent. You've been really busy.
Yeah, I have been busy, but it's a nice busy. It's, I say, it's just the sort of working conditions for me. They're by far the best and nicest police offices I've ever worked in anywhere. It's a really good sort of surroundings and a really enthusiastic team who want to do the job and are very skilled at doing it. And that's very much my way of things from when I was in the police as well, is that you trust your team to do the job and you provide the direction and the kind of the vision for them to buy into, but it's relying upon their skills and their abilities to do it. And that's exactly how I'll do this. It's not a dictatorship of any sort where I just sort of say this will happen. You trust people to do their job until such time as they give you a reason not to trust them, and hopefully that won't happen.
Yes.
I've got a quick question for you, Colin. Is this your second term in your role as Crime and Police Commissioner?
No. It's the first time I've done it. It came about really by surprise. Took us all by surprise. The previous Police and Crime Commissioner for Norfolk was elected in 2024, and she was elected as a Labour candidate. And then the Labour government then decided that they were going to scrap the role in 2028, and she took exception to that. And she then resigned the Labour whip, as it were, resigned from the Labour Party and carried on as an independent. And then she had various sort of personal circumstances which meant she couldn't carry on. So she resigned in June of this year. So it was like a by-election. And when that came about, for the last year, or just over a year, I've actually been Reform UK's police and crime advisor, which means that I kind of, that's what it says in the tin, really. I advise about policing and criminal justice issues to headquarters, to the party, but I've also got a small team of us that are working on kind of policy and things for the manifesto for the next general election in terms of crime in the criminal justice system. So I'm doing that anyway. I'm the chair at the moment of my local constituency branch as well. And so it kind of seemed to be a no-brainer, really. There was a vacancy in a by-election in Norfolk. Reform UK wanted to stand somebody in it, obviously, because they thought they had a chance of winning it. And I live in Norfolk, and you have to live in the county to stand as the PCC. So it kind of was a bit of a no-brainer, I guess, that I should stand. And I hadn't planned to. I mean, my kind of political history is very recent, because obviously you can't take an active part in politics when you're a police officer. So for 30 years, I was completely out. Yeah, I was completely out of the game. Although I've always had this, really strong interest. I did government politics for my A-levels, and I've always been interested in politics. So that came along a year ago, and then this opportunity came along, and I hadn't planned to stand. What happened was it's a long story, really, but I'll give it quickly. It's mildly interesting. So last year, you'll be aware that last year in 2025, the government decided that county council elections in some places shouldn't take place, and one of those places was Norfolk. So we didn't have county council elections. But despite that, we had a vacancy on Norfolk County Council in Disson Roydon, which is quite close to where I live, because the incumbent Conservative had resigned. And so we thought there'd not be county council elections all over, but we would have a by-election in Disson Roydon. And since it's within the constituency that I'm the chair of, we were talking about candidates, and eventually I was persuaded by others on the committee and so forth that it should be me and that I should stand. So I said, yeah, okay, I'll do that. And it wasn't, I'll be frank, it wasn't a life goal of mine to be a county councillor, but by any means. But I understood the reasoning and why, it would be a good idea to have me stand. So I agreed to it. We started campaigning, although the election hadn't been announced. We'd started campaigning around in February time. We started knocking on doors and talking to people. And then, of course, what happened is one day in March, the government decided we were going to have the elections after all, across the board for the county council, which meant rather than just having this one by-election to concentrate on, we had 9 divisions in our constituency that we had to find candidates for and campaign for and so forth. So all of a sudden, what was a relatively kind of focused and targeted and therefore relatively easy sort of job of one by-election became a real slog of finding 9 candidates and campaigning and trying to do the best that we could in terms of fighting that election on May the 7th. And we did that. And I stayed as the candidate for Disson Roydon. And it was, I think looking back on it, I probably neglected myself in favour of the others in my constituency because we weren't exactly overloaded with people that were helping us campaign. And I didn't really use very much of that facility at all. I got some friends to come over from elsewhere to come and help me do my campaign down in Disson Roydon. And in the event, what happened was that the Conservative candidate for Disson Roydon was a bloke called Graham Minshaw, and he's a lovely, lovely man. He's about my age. He's a former soldier. He's a former mayor of Diss. He's lived in the town for 40 years or so, and he's a really good district councillor for the same area, and a nice chap. And in the event, although elsewhere throughout the constituency, the Conservative vote collapsed to about 17-18% in most places, he managed to hang on to 26.5%, and I couldn't take enough from him to beat the Green candidate, and he kind of came through the middle. So the Green beat me by 78 votes, and then I beat Graham by about 200 votes. So obviously, if we'd have, it was quite funny. I spoke to him before the election, and we feared this happening. And he said, "Well, you ought to stand down." And I said, "Well, no, you ought to stand down." And we sort of had a laugh about it, As I say, it was. It's a shame in some ways because I quite looked forward to working with him because obviously he would have, if I'd have won, I'd have been the county councillor for the division, and he'd have been the district councillor, and we'd have, I'm sure, really well and worked together, to make the place better. But that didn't happen, and I lost that. So I was instantly kind of, I don't know, when I found out I'd lost, obviously I was disappointed because you're disappointed if you lose anything, but I was instantly buoyed up again because 2 of my candidates who we hadn't perhaps expected to win, but both of whom had worked really, really hard and campaigned really hard, both actually won. And I was so pleased and overjoyed for them. That was the Maggie Thomas in West Deptwade and Joe Kerrison in East Deptwade, who both won their divisions to reform, and are both turning out to be fantastic county councillors and really getting involved with their communities and doing stuff. So it was kind of bittersweet. The disappointment was lifted almost straight away when I found out that they'd won. So we carried on from there, and I thought, well, I'll carry on being chairman, and I've got some. We've had our difficulties with the branch, like many. When you start something from scratch, it's often difficult to find the right people to fill in the various roles, and people who are committed and who understand what they're doing, know what they're doing, and we've kind of come through that, and that also made it difficult to do the campaign because we were doing it on a very kind of new committee that had just come together, and it was hard work. We're through that now. I've got some really good people there on the committee that we've started doing proper fundraising events, because that was the problem. I mean, we were buying leaflets and signs and boards and things for the campaign, and we went down to about 40 quid in our bank account, which is like, we didn't broke. and so we've had some help and some donations, and we've put on a couple of events and raised some money so our bank account's looking healthier. And it kind of it's like a snowball, isn't it? It kind of gathers momentum. When you put some money, you can do other things and make more. So yeah, the branch is looking a lot healthier now as well. And I thought, well, I'll carry on with that, and of course I'll carry on with my my headquarters job and carry on playing golf and doing the things that I enjoy doing. And then this by-election for PCC came along, and so for the second time this year, the unexpected election has sort of turned my life upside down a bit. But when it came to the campaign for PCC, I kind of looked back on what I'd learned from the county council campaign and decided, well, this time I'm not going to look back on this if I lose and say you could have done more, which is how I was looking back on the county council campaign. So I kind of decided that I was going to do as much as I possibly could myself. And I have to say, we had an awful lot of help from headquarters as well. Reform wanted to win this, wanted for us to win this. So they gave resources. I had people come from Leicestershire, from London, from Bedfordshire, from Suffolk, from Essex, helping me campaign. And it's a hard campaign to do because the area is huge. It's an entire county. There are 715,000 electors, I think, spread about 480,000 addresses. Someone calculated, I don't know if it's true, but they told me that if you did 12 hours a day knocking on doors for 4.5 years, you could get round to them all. That's the scale of it. We had the rally where, of course, Lynn, you were there at the rally, weren't you? And at the start of the campaign in Norwich with Nigel Farage, and that was really helpful because we had sort of 400 people there, and they all took away leaflets and signs and things like that, and tried to get the momentum up a bit. And yeah, there were a couple of county council, one county council and one district council by-election on the same day. County council in Old Catton in Norwich, and a district council by-election in Toftwood near Dereham. And I did quite a lot of campaigning in both those places. Sadly, we didn't win either of those seats for the councils, but the feeling was that the turnout there would be bigger than it would be elsewhere because of the council by-elections as well. And that proved to be the case. They ended up with sort of 30-35%, I think, turnout, whereas across the board for the PCC, it was very low. It was only 17%, which is kind of disappointing in a way. I think a lot of it's to do with the fact that people don't really understand the role. They don't understand what they might be voting for, what they might be voting for. It's always been a low turnout. But what that does mean, of course, my majority was 14,300 or something. It was quite, on a 17% turnout, that was a huge majority, and it kind of exceeded our expectations because I thought we had a chance of winning and we might be able to win, and I didn't really think that we'd win by such a huge margin. And there's a couple of things that played into that. One of which was obvious when I was doing the campaigning and talking to people on the doorstep, where they would say, "I'm not a Reform supporter. I'm going to vote Conservative, maybe, or one of the other parties. But looking at the 7 candidates for this job, you're the best candidate, and I think I'm going to vote for you because you're the best candidate for the job." And I quite like that. I think that's how local politics probably should work anyway. Is that if you no matter what colour the rosette is, you say if there's somebody who's actually got the skills to do the job. And we had some sort of outstanding results really, because I was there at the count. So there were 7 different counts because it's the whole county. The local district councils run the counts for their area. So there were 2 at Broadlands Business Centre where the main count was, at Horizon or whatever they call it. And then there was one in Norwich, one in Yarmouth, I think, one in Kingsley, and one in Dereham. I don't know, somewhere else. But there were 7 of them. We had people at them all, and what happens is they do the counts, the individual counts there, and they kind of declare their results, and then they get fed into the central count where I was, and they're all added together, and then you get the result. And because we had people at all of these other sort of satellite counts, we started to get their results in, and we could see what was going on with Broadlands and South Norfolk, where we were. And our feeling was that we could probably win South Norfolk, that we'd almost certainly win Brecon, and we'd probably win West Norfolk as well. And then the other four, which were Norwich, Great Yarmouth, North Norfolk, and Broadlands, we thought the likelihood is that we'd probably come second in most of those, possibly third in Norwich itself. We could win Broadlands, but the Independent was very strong there. He had a big following there, so that was always going to be a bit tough. But that we'd come second to different people in each place. And so the overall effect would be that we'd be okay, and there was a path through for us to win. That was kind of what we thought going into the count. But we're standing there at the count, and we could see that we've won South Norfolk from just watching the piles. You know, it's pretty obvious we'd won that. Broadlands was very close in the scheme of things, and in the end we lost by about 650 or something, which wasn't too bad. But of course we didn't know what was going on in the other 5 places, and the first one that came through was North Norfolk. Now North Norfolk, as you probably know, after the great man Norman Lamb, and I mean that sincerely, he was a very, very good constituency MP, is a bit of a Liberal Democrat stronghold, and we hadn't expected, we'd expected we'd come second there if we were lucky to the Liberal Democrats. It wouldn't matter because they wouldn't win anywhere else. And somebody came up and said to me, we've won North Norfolk. And I said, what? And they said, no, we've won North Norfolk by 2,000 and a bit. I said, no, you must have got that wrong. No, it must be West Norfolk, it must be Kings Lynn. Try it, check it. So she went back and checked it and said, no, you've won North Norfolk. And that was really astounding. We actually beat the Conservatives in second place and Liberals were third. And I guess that was the moment that I knew we'd probably won, because I thought if we're going to win North Norfolk, then we ended up winning in Kings Lynn by, I don't know, 3,000 or something. I think Brecon was about 6,000. The interesting one as well was Great Yarmouth, where obviously Great Yarmouth First / Restore were very strong, and we hadn't really campaigned there much. I did a day in Gorston, walking up and down the prom, just talking to people, which was actually great fun. We'd kind of thought we'd probably only get single figures for our vote over there, and we actually got 20% of it. So we lost it to Restore Britain or Great Yarmouth First, but we'd expected that. But actually, the showing we got, 20%.
Wow.
Was really pleasing. And again, I don't know how much that is because how much that is reform, how much of that is, well, we hold our nose and vote reform because he's got the experience for the job. So that was the story of the election, really, and the result. And it was all just a bit like, well, just overwhelming in some ways that we won, and and I was desperately happy. But you do walk away thinking, what have I let myself in for? What comes next? I've got to actually do it. It's one thing doing the campaign, but it's another actually doing the job, But yeah, so that's kind of how that all went, and it's an interesting thing being, I'm the first and possibly the only, possibly the last as well, reform PCC to be elected, because they are going to be, although the law hasn't actually been passed yet, the overwhelming likelihood is that the role is going to be abolished in May 2028. And what that will mean for us locally in East Anglia is there should be the election for the mayor of Norfolk and Suffolk at that point. And then he or she, whoever wins that election, will kind of take on the function of the PCC, but appoint a deputy mayor for policing, I guess, or some similar title. That's what they do in London with the mayor. And that's important because what the role of the PCC very much is to be the link between the population and the electorate and the chief constable and the police force. So that role, you can abolish the post, but the need for that kind of connection and that kind of accountability and holding to account is always going to be there. But I think what the plan is, I think, for the Home Office to not have any more by-elections if other PCCs resign, because you can see it happening, can't you? If coming down the track is your role is being abolished in 2028 and you want to find another job and you get a chance, as we get closer to that date, it's likely that more and more PCCs will be saying, no, I've got to resign because I've got another job. And you need a mechanism for appointing somebody to do that role until 2028. So it may well be there aren't any more by-elections for PCCs, and I'll have a little bit of notoriety or uniqueness or something in the fact that I was the only Reform PCC ever elected. There is another Reform PCC. It's a guy called Rupert Matthews who is the PCC for Leicestershire, but he was elected as a Conservative. I think he's in his second term, and he defected to Reform, funnily enough, the same day that I started the job as Police and Crime Advisor. We were together up in headquarters in London doing the press conference, and I've kept in touch with him ever since. And of course, he knows the job inside out. He's done it for 6 years already, so he's quite a handy person to have on speed dial, and he's a lovely bloke, to a very interesting chap, historian. And he came over and spent the weekend in Norfolk helping me campaign as well, which was very good of him.
Well, how good is that?
Yeah. So yeah, that's about it really, I suppose, and that's a quick potted history of my last 12 months. It's all been a bit of a whirlwind. As I say, I've gone from whereas I was playing golf 3 or 4 times a week, enjoying my retirement, and now I'm busy again. I think I've played 8 times this year so far. That's all, but I kind of miss it, but I can always go back to it when I get more time. So yeah.
That's Prakash's favourite sport, isn't it?
Yeah, I play golf, but not. I'm still a novice. I think I've been playing for about 5 years, but still a novice.
Really? Right.
I just play for fun, really.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of do and did play just for fun. But in fact, I didn't. I started when I was a child, but when I was 13, I think I started playing golf, and I played up into my sort of early 30s quite regularly, and got my handicap down to about 12 or something, and then children came along, and time wasn't there. And then I moved to work in Yorkshire for a few years, and it's a different game, golf in West Yorkshire, because there's a lot of hills.
It could be difficult, that, yeah.
Yeah.
Not flat like Norfolk.
No, exactly. Although if you go to Borba, I was amazed at how many hills there are there at that course. But anyway, for Norfolk. But yeah, so... and it was only about 10 years ago that I started playing again. I think 2016. Now, I'd had all sorts of problems with one of my knees. Well, both of them, but one of them's fine. I had one operation years and years ago in my late 20s, and it's been fine ever since. But I was a footballer and a cricketer sort of thing, and put a lot of strain on my knees, I guess, by playing football and by fast bowling. But the left one's I've had problems with 3 operations. It's never going to get better, sort of thing. And the physio said, you need to strengthen the muscles. You need to use it, and that will make the joint better. So I've got 4 dogs, and so I do a bit of walking with those anyway. But I thought, well, if I go and play golf again, that's going to get me walking. And touch wood, it's been fantastic. Not only have I enjoyed playing golf and got my handicap back down to 12 again, but
That's good.
I've actually got a knee that works now, and I don't mind walking. And I tell you what, you couldn't do campaigning with the knee as it was. I've noted the amount of walking that I did in those 4 weeks, banging on doors, was just incredible. And it becomes almost obsessive, because you're out and you're sort of looking at the watch. You think, I can get one more road in, and all of a sudden you're back home at 7 o'clock or something, and dinner's cold. But yeah, it was worth it in the end, obviously.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Thank you.
No, it's okay. It's been an absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure to come in.
Well, just one final question. In 2028, how will the mayors, do you think they're going to be capable of doing your job?
No, they'll have to appoint somebody like me. I don't say me, but somebody who's got some experience of. Okay. Yeah, this is the interesting thing about the election, really. My predecessor, I don't know what her background was actually. I'm not sure. But the other candidates, you had somebody who runs pubs, you had somebody who sells yachts, you had a retired nurse, you had somebody who does PR, I think, a former soldier who's a farmer, and something else I can't remember. But I was the only one of the 7 who had anything like any knowledge at all of policing. And there were some people during the campaign, probably a bit mischievously, who said, oh yeah, well, it's a fox in the hen house and this sort of thing. How can you hold the police to account if you're one of them? And it's really not the case, because as I said to you, I've got a great deal of support for the people at the sharp end, but I think leadership and the way that policing nationally has been led over the last few years leaves a lot to be desired. And so, it wasn't an issue for me. But what was an issue was the fact that I don't know how one of those other candidates who knew nothing at all about policing would have coped so quickly with what I've done in the last 2 weeks. Because just sitting down and knowing the terminology, the acronyms, the kind of issues and the things that people do when you're meeting your team and looking at what the things are. So I think I think it's a good idea to have somebody who's either been a police officer or indeed been a PCC, because somebody like Rupert, who wasn't a police officer, who's done the PCC job for 6 years, he obviously knows what he's talking about now as well. But to appoint somebody in cold to take on oversight of Norfolk and Suffolk police forces together, good luck with that, I think I'd say.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yes, that's been lovely. Thank you.